Welcome to Newsworthy Stories with Jacqueline Jimenez. Today we're going to talk about discovering your gifts, and I want to do it in a little bit of a different way. Um, Sometimes we hear or we say about someone's talents, wow, they have a God given gift, they must have been born with that. And, really, there's so much truth in that because yes, we can be really good at things. Maybe we went to school for it and we're trained for something, but a gift is something that is bestowed on you. Many of you will receive gifts, right? And you unwrap it immediately and you know what that gift is. But there are certain gifts you have to discover. And today I kind of want to hit on my own personal story of really a gift I didn't even know I had, and how it later led me to better understand what I do today, how it impacted Newsworthy Stories. Uh, but it was 100% a God given gift. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And I call them God's Girl greetings, right? Although they're really not greeting cards, they're really messages, poems, prayers that were written to encourage people. And it really started right after I graduated from college. I had a boss and I worked for a management consulting firm. In fact, one of the top management consulting firms in the country. Executives from all around the world would come. I remember a group coming from France, and I had my sister was born in France, so I would talk to them about France and what she learned and how she started speaking French before she started speaking English, because her babysitter, uh, there were like 11 girls and she was like the 12th daughter, if you will. And so she started speaking French before she started speaking English. So we had these, interactions. But it was at that management consulting firm that this boss of mine, he was honestly the nicest man, one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he lost his father. And they were so close to one another, and it impacted him. Here we were in this management consulting firm, and the idea behind this management consulting firm was zero tolerance. So if you can imagine losing your father and then having to come back and face executives that have flown in from around the world and deal with a topic like zero tolerance in your company. And, that really wasn't his character. And so once I had learned that, I just decided, I was like, God, I just don't want to say I'm sorry. I don't know what prompted it. I don't even know if this man was religious or anything. He was just nice. And I said, so I began to pray. I just began to pray about him, or pray for words specifically. I just didn't want to say I was sorry. And surprisingly to me, I began to get these words that were coming to my mind, and they rhymed. I was like, wow, this is different. And I began to write them down because I'm a writer, right? So these words were coming to my mind, and they would come in little pauses. So I would get two lines and then I would start. But once I started to write, or had the time to write more, the words just kept coming. And before I knew it, I had this entire poem, and it was completely personal, directed to his needs. Now he was this executive that had to face these people, but he couldn't respond the way he felt, right? And so this poem was about how he had to face that difficulty of just facing these executives, but still being professional, even though he was hurting deeply. And at the end of it, ultimately, this poem was about how, even though he lost his father, God would be a father to them both. His father was now with God. He was going to be watched over by God and God would be the father to them both. And I thought, wow, this was amazing. And so I went and I bought a blank note card that you can buy from the store, and I wrote the words in it and I gave it to him. And the response that he had was just like none that I had ever seen. And I was like, wow, the next time, something like that happens, or I want to encourage somebody, I'm going to pray for words. And so I began to do that over the years, not thinking anything about it. But as a writer, I always kept the words, put them in a folder, put them somewhere. I never threw them away. Bottom line, I had to go back and find some of them. Um, I wasn't always that organized, right? And so over the years, I just began to do this. I'd hear about somebody's need, a difficulty. Maybe they're having problems with a coworker, or it didn't always have to be like a death. But I did write several poems and prayers, and usually it was from their perspective. It was like almost as if you were praying on their behalf. And these were the types of cards. So when they read it, it was almost like their prayer to God. And again, I tucked them away. But then as I began to hear similar circumstances. I'd be like, wow, that's just like, this other person, a year ago or whenever it was. And so instead of praying for a new card, I began to share the same poems with different people, or words of encouragement for different people who had similar situations. And after a while, it dawned on me. I was like, oh, wow. Uh, these are not just for my friends. They can be shared, in cards. And so God's Girl Greetings, as I began to call them, was born. When I came up with the logo, I was again praying, God, who is God's girl? And I'm getting, I think about it, I get, a little emotional. There's a picture of a little girl that when we lived in the Philippines, we had a nanny, and it wasn't uncommon there. And she created all these straw pictures, some of this young girl praying, because that's what she saw us doing as little girls, me and my sister praying, saying our prayers. And she created this picture, and it was on the wall. And I was like, wow, I'm God's girl, and there are God's girls all over the world, girls that, love the Lord. So ultimately, that's how God's Girl Greetings was born. And this became the logo that you would see on the back of the card. And I'm holding it up to you, and you can see it's more of a silhouette of God's Girl Greetings. And then you see below it a woman after God's heart. And there's even a story to that, because the first web designer, because I didn't know anything about websites. I certainly didn't know anything about making cards. I was such a tomboy. I played pool, rode motorcycles. That's me. Foosball, things like that. I was such a tomboy growing up. My dad wanted a boy, and I was it. I've worked on cars with him. But my first web designer, he was out of Kansas, never met him. And while we were going through the process of creating a website, he would always respond or call me Lady David. And I was like, after a while, I was like, hey, why do you call me Lady David? Because like that was not, anything I had ever said. And he said, well, you're like King David. You're, King David in the Bible. God referred to King David as a man after his own heart. And I was like, wow, you're right. I am a woman after, because you're a woman after God's heart. And I was like, I am. He's just really good to me. He has just expressed himself in so many ways. So I began making these cards by hand, and they have, come up in many different forms. At first, I started, there was like a little window you could see through, see the title. I had little feathers that made like an angel's wings, when I first started. In fact, when I was trying to create it, I wasn't trying to make the cards by hand, but I knew, because I used to write the cards on a blank note card, that a card was one way to share it. So that's kind of how the card concept came up. Um, but ultimately, in fact, I didn't even know what Michael's was. I didn't even know that Michael's was a craft place. I was like, what is Michael's? They were like, people were like, take these to Michael's. I was like, okay, what's that? And, but I began to do the research. So, right, we're going back to what? Let's go back to discovering your gifts. So, how do you discover these gifts? So, here I had the words, and to me, the words are the gift, but I needed some wrapping paper. And so the wrapping paper began to be the card itself, the physical card that went around it. And so I found out, what do you make cards with? I just asked some simple questions. How do you make a card? Well, you need cardstock. I was like, oh, okay. So a paper company, I found a paper company. It was Kelly Paper. And I still use Kelly Paper today. Um, but they had this like parchment looking paper, and I go, oh, that's kind of cool, parchment. These words are all born out of prayer. Cool, let me try that one. And I found, a good weight for it. And then I used, pretty much the white paper under it. And I found a printer that would economically print all these different cards that I had. And they kind of came in really two sizes. Like I based the size based on the size of the poem. And it was either a large card or a small card. So people always ask me, can you make this small card into a large card? And I go, no, this is how they come. you know, this is my bandwidth right here, small and large. And so I began to, uh, I walked into Michael's and just walked around, not even sure what I was looking for. But I ended up grabbing some of this trim, when I first was starting, which is like lace and things like that. And ultimately, I ended up in the design district because I was in California at this time, the design district in LA. And all the materials that they make wedding dresses out of, and these elegant, designs, fashion designs. And I just started taking those materials and I began making these cards, because you will find, especially your God-given gifts, that just like God, when he gives a gift, it is the utmost, he's going to give you the best of it. So everything that I did, even to the ink, the type of ink that I was using on the cards, the printer was like, this is the most expensive ink you could have chosen. I was like, yeah, but that gold ink, it was just so important. I was like, that's what I have in my mind as to how it should look. And so sure enough, that was the ink that I would use. Sure enough, we're getting this lace from the design district in LA that were used for wedding dresses. And well, this is what the cards look like. And it just, like I said, when I was creating this, trying to create this, I was looking for somebody else. I was looking to create a design for somebody else to create. Not me. Not me. But ironically, when I finished, right, when you finish that product, um, I was like, wow, okay, this is something people might want to keep. And I realized later that a keepsake was more valuable, because we get a lot of cards that are manufactured, but we don't keep them all the time. We might like them, or some people keep all the cards, but there's usually certain ones that we do keep. We really like the picture or how it's made. Some of them are more, 3D-ish. Now they have more texture. things that are sentimental to us. But these cards were designed, I found, because that people were keeping them. And I used to take them to like a farmer's market because I didn't know what to do with them once I made them, right? And I would take them to the farmer's market in LA, and not in LA, but when I lived in California. Actually, I did. I used to take them to Venice Beach, if you can imagine. These cards on Venice Beach. Um, Funny story, Queen Latifah came and bought like a whole set of cards for me on Venice Beach. It was crazy because she was on a motorcycle. And so I just kind of crushed them all together. together. But Queen Latifah has a whole set of those cards that she bought for me off of Venice Beach. It's funny. I don't know why that just came to my mind. But many, many different people from different places. I've now made thousands of these cards over the years, but really the words are the gift. I would have never in a million years thought that I would be making these cards. Again, the first person actually to order the cards, at the time I wasn't even finished with the design quite so. And the first person to order the cards was my hairstylist at the time, like when I actually used to wear my hair down all the time. And she said, "I want a Christmas card for my for my customers." And I was like, I don't write Christmas cards. I didn't have any birthday cards. I didn't have any Christmas cards. I was trying to be a gift card person. These cards were written generally specifically for people who were either, needing encouragement or through celebrating, a triumph. And I was like, I don't have Christmas cards. And she was like, well, see if you can make me a Christmas card. I go, well, I'll pray about one. I was really sarcastic because I was like, Christmas, I don't, and hair, you know, I don't know if God is, going to answer that prayer. I didn't have a lot of confidence. And it was pressure. I didn't like that somebody was asking me to write something because then there was pressure. There was stress connected with it. I was like, I don't know if I can come up with words. Usually the words just came. So I prayed. I was like, well, God, I'm praying for these cards. And do you have anything with Christmas and hair that you can share with me? And sure enough, one of the most incredible cards, it's called Serving God. And ultimately, God paralleled the washing of the feet. If you know the story of Jesus, before he went to the cross, during the Last Supper, he washed his disciples' feet, which, his point was you should serve one another. And he compared the washing of the feet with the washing of the hair. And I was like, wow, this is neat. God, he answered a very specific prayer from somebody else. And so, I tucked that away, and she asked for 100 of those cards. And so, and they were purple because she loved purple. So I had to make 100 purple cards for her. And again, my story, my first business was born. There was always this demand for me, that pressure to go, and it made me go get my license and get my da 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 da. And sure enough, my first business was born. And so, when you're discovering your gifts, sometimes all of a sudden you'll have a demand and you won't even realize it. My mother says I've been writing cards since I was in high school, but I don't remember that as well. But you have these gifts, you have this gift to write. But later on, when I said, hey, this gift later would impact Newsworthy Stories. Well, it did, because this is where, again, this personal story takes us another leap, because in news, you're writing these stories one after the other. But once I realized that God would answer these stories or answer these prayers I began to pray over my news stories. And I would be like, God, how should I tell this story? And I began to put myself in the place of some of these criminals that are alleged criminals, right? They haven't been, or people that, and I was like, I should tell this story differently. I should make another phone call. Who is this person? Why are they being accused? And so I used to do a little more research than just whatever came. I would make a phone call. I would begin to look for more details. Why did this happen? What's the story behind this person? And it became more personal in a different way. And also, what angle should I tell this story? That again, I was looking for direction, insight from God. And I was like, wow, um, I carry that today. And so for every client and every person that I meet, you don't have to be religious, but for me, I am going to pray over what's best for your business. How can I tell your story? How will this impact people for good? How can this impact and tell a story? That's why Newsworthy Stories uh, works with so many difference makers, because those are the stories that I am drawn to. Because I bring people together through story. And when you collaborate and bring people together, um, you make such a much bigger difference than if it's just me telling a story about you. And sometimes it is one person, but often it's that collaboration that makes the difference. And so I wanted to share that story today on a day when, we're focusing on gifts and discovering gifts or giving gifts. And I just think that each of us has this God-given gift. And a lot of times I think it has to do with your hands or whatever you have physically. It could be your feet. You could be athletic. You could sing, but a lot of times you don't even know it. I certainly didn't. If you told me I was going to be making cards by hand, I would have laughed at you. I would have laughed at you. I was like, no way. No way. Poems and prayers? Mm-mm. Not here. But they have impacted so many lives. And so I really tell people these cards are for life's occasions. They're really tools for tools for mission work. They're really tools to help people. And if you go to godsgirlgreetings.com, there is a web page there that you can go to and that you can see and read them. And I would say go to the products page, because there I really have it uh, sectioned off, and encouragement, salvation, loneliness. There are cards for endurance. It's just, goes on and breaks them down. Now, my website is very old, especially because when COVID happened, God's Go Greetings really kind of halted because I made the cards by hand, and Newsworthy Stories was really just and people didn't know how to catch COVID, and handmade things were kind of like plus I had trigger finger all of a sudden in both of my thumbs. It was incredibly painful. Like, if you never heard of trigger finger, you're if you bend your thumb like this, it would snap into place like this, and then like you couldn't open it. You had to like pry it open. It was so painful. So it was very painful to make the cards, and at the same time Newsworthy Stories, because businesses needed stories um, to help them grow during that shutdown period. Uh, one was growing and one was kind of like holding down. So what do I say? What am I saying? So all these years I've been doing God's Go Greetings, really, oh my goodness, quite some time now. I guess 20 years now has passed. probably since I've been doing God's Girl Greetings. And now the one thing that, I was pivoting with Newsworthy Stories, because that really, even Newsworthy Stories was not my intent. I was just planning to do media strategy uh, for Newsworthy Stories and just freelance, for the networks. But again, that my business just took off with those stories and getting media coverage. I was surprisingly good at writing press releases for people because I was a news producer who used to receive all the press releases. And so I knew exactly what a news producer is looking for. So all of a sudden I was generating news coverage for television and having this great impact on social media with these news stories. And so training, but that training is to me still the key, that media strategy, those workshops and master classes. That's why now you're hearing me talk a lot about that, because it's so important to understand the story behind it. And so for God's Girl Greetings, the story is a little different, because now I know that the cards, you can purchase the cards, but really, while things were slow, or slow, or I wasn't doing them directly, I should say, I was still making the cards. I was making the cards for my church, or like if we had a mission trip, I would have cards made and I would use them for the people. And I began to do team building with them on these local mission trips. And I find that team building is probably the direction um, I will go along with certain aspects of God's Girl Greetings. So I'm pivoting and, as to what to do and how to rework them. But team building is definitely something. I just find that if you can participate and in this gift and put the cards together and then maybe share them, like most of the time we were sharing them with seniors and things like that, and they would put them on their wheelchairs or walkers. Now you've got this message going through a senior living facility. God is working without you. You have no idea what God will do with your gifts if you allow him. So I encourage you today to discover your gifts. And I would start with prayer, because you will never know the answer you might get when you ask. And so today, I'm encouraging you to discover your God-given gifts and allow him to grow. Allow him to grow you in it. Even when you discover it, you still have to work. It's not just like, "Whoa, it's awesome," You still have to work, and I know it's a God-given gift, because no matter how long it sits and waits for me to come back to it, right? It's constant. I always know that is your gift, and it's your job to grow it. And he gave me those words, and so I have to make sure people read them. If nothing else, if you do nothing else, go and read them. But I'm sure that once you read them, you're going to want to share them. And how you want to share them, you're just going to have to right now, just reach out and let me know. Um, if there's somebody out there that wants to work on God's Girl Greetings and, develop God's Girl Greetings, I'm all ears, because I know that I can't do both and I can't do them alone. Together, I needed help then, and I needed help. I definitely need help now. Uh, but team building, I think, is a big aspect of it. I think that students with volunteer hours will be excellent, a big part of that. And I'm looking forward to learning, discovering how to share these cards again in a different way. Still, you can still get them and share them because they are wonderful. I always thought they would be great for as gifts for speakers and things like that. And of course for missions. If you want to, if you're a hotel that helps Christian conferences, it's a great welcome gift. Things like that. But I have lots of ideas, lots of ideas. But I need someone who is willing to walk me through it, and think it through with me, brainstorm with me, because I keep coming back here. God won't let me let go of the gift that He gave me, and that's when you know it's from God, because He's like, no, this is your gift, and so I've got to figure it out. I got to figure out how to balance them both, because that was always the plan. The plan was always to do both, to freelance with Newsworthy Stories, and to grow God's Go Greetings. And one cannot do without the other, because He'll keep bringing me back here until I do it. So now I'm sharing it. So I am now. You can hold me accountable. You can say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And it'll keep me going. So I appreciate your accountability on this. And I look forward to hearing what gifts that you have and how we can share them together. Thank you so much for listening to Newsworthy Stories today, and just the story that is important to me and important to share. Have a great day and a great season. See you soon.